Andy Nevers, thanks so much for joining us on the Plantarion podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm excited to sit down and chat and, learn a little bit more about you guys and share a little bit about myself as well.
Yeah, we would love to hear more about you. And before we do you have a moment of gratitude that you want to share with us and the listeners?
Hey, I'm grateful for a lot of things. I'm grateful, first of all, to be alive today, especially in a time when things are so scary all around the world. Fortunately, I'm big on family, and, all of my loved ones are safe and everybody is doing well. So every day that I wake up and that remains the same, I'm grateful for that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I love thinking about what I'm grateful for when I wake up first thing in the morning. And I definitely think about my immediate family, my extended family, people's health, and all of that. So I think that a lot of people can hear you on that one. And I think being plant-based is part of that for you, right? Tell us a little bit about your plant-based journey and how that's changed your life and your health.
Yeah, going plant-based is definitely going to change your life. It's going to change your life in more ways than you could ever imagine or expected when you start out on the journey. And so, same for me. I saw the documentaries. What the Health and Forks Over Knives were the first two that I saw, and it got me curious. It was more curiosity than anything else. And for me, it was doctors saying that, hey, we are on the reactive side of medicine, and really we need to think about being more proactive and, consider the things that we're eating. And I'm a common sense guy. If it makes sense and it sounds like, hey, this is what we should be doing, I don't need to wait for, to break down the science and everything. But again, that started my curiosity. And, it was late one night that I sat down and I watched these two documentaries to get started. And the following day, I was so sort of, that curiosity led me to saying, I immediately want to try this. And so, looking back at it now, I tell people I went cold turkey vegan, but I wasn't thinking that I was going to go cold turkey vegan. I was thinking that, hey, I want to try this thing that they're talking about. And at that time, it was more about like the health benefits that I heard, because, truth be told, I wasn't so conscious about like animal welfare or, environmental concerns. I just, I made the connection that it's a healthier way to live. And people are getting all these diseases that are food related. And for me, it was just like, how come I didn't hear about this before? This stuff is happening, and it seems to be happening far and wide, and I'm just learning about it. So I got up and I decided, okay, so all right, I don't know what to eat, right? But I'm gonna figure this out. The only thing I know is that I've been eating a certain way my whole life, and for the most part, what I gathered from the documentaries was that, okay, you cannot eat that same way anymore. So that was my starting point. And I remember I had the first meal that next day that was 100% plant-based, and it felt like I wasn't really having a meal. It just felt, very odd. It was like something was missing from the plate. And I just kept, I'm the type of person, once I make a commitment to trying or doing something, I stick with it. But it was really challenging. It wasn't as easy because, you get through the first day, you get through another day, and, as the days start to pile up, you start to think, man, I miss eating this kind of food, or I miss eating that. And, you're kind of wrestling with yourself essentially. And so, but one thing that happened was a few things happened. First, I started feeling so much better just health-wise. I was sleeping better. I would go on runs and I would get all these kind of flare-ups, joint pain and stuff. and I noticed that I was running a lot longer, wasn't feeling any pain. And the thing that was so magical for me was it's all started happening so quickly. For the first time too in my life, I was starting to gain weight because for the first time, I was sitting behind my computer almost all day, as a tech entrepreneur and as someone that worked a full, day job. And so I just, from the time I wake up in the morning almost till the time I go to sleep, I was sitting behind a computer. And so I started gaining some weight. And I tell you, I always pride myself in being healthy and being fit and looking, just lean, sort of that military background that I have. And so just to see the weight just fell off, without, anything that I had to do extra in terms of like going to lift weights or, working out longer. Everything it was just like magical. I saw it like a silver bullet, right? So I started feeling better. I started, my weight, I started losing the weight that I was so concerned. I was growing more and more concerned about it actually. But it wasn't easy, but and even till today, not so much today, I think, because I've been plant-based now for about over 3 years. But leading up to this point, there were times where I would go to like a summer barbecue and, I would see people eating the regular stuff and, I'm tempted, but I stuck with it. And, I feel like I just continue to reap the benefits. But I could get into more about sort of my evolution and where I am today. But I know you guys just kind of wanted to hear, how did this started for you? And, those documentaries what got me curious in the first place. But then, it was just kind of a building block from there. It was just like, it's like an eye opener, right? You get into it, very little. And the more you learn, the more you become sort of aware, and you're like, oh man, I've been living the wrong way my whole life in terms of food. So that's kind of my discovery of the whole thing, but yeah, to answer you guys' question, that's what I was thinking.
I love that I'm talking to another version of myself, it seems.
Right.
You and I.
Cold vegan tofu.
Cold turkey,
vegan.
cold tofu overnight, and made the decision for health reasons, and those documentaries were impactful as well. What the Health wasn't out yet because it was 5 years earlier that I started, but Forks Over Knives was there, definitely impactful, and allows me to be here today because I was told I wouldn't be. For those people that are listening, know my story and know that at the age of 40, I was told I would no longer be on this planet, but the change in nutrition and lifestyle allowed me to be here, and I'm living a great life. And our story is somewhat similar, and our haircut is very similar, and it's a beautiful one. And just, it's great to have you here. Great story. Glad you found this lifestyle and things are going well for you.
So how did you find that first documentary? What made you stumble across it?
So, I had started dating someone, and she was plant-based, and I like how she approached it. She wasn't very forceful, because I had dated a vegetarian before, and she didn't really talk to me much about the lifestyle. The only thing that I knew is that she didn't eat any meat. She would have some dairy, but no meat. And she would tell me that eating meat is bad. It's no good. But that's to the extent we had conversation about food, But this new girlfriend that I had, she was just like, she would drop hints, and she would say, hey, I think you should really check out these documentaries because, they're very, they have, very, and because she was getting to know me and she knew the type of person that I was, she figured that just giving me the documentaries was sort of the thing that would make the most impact, as opposed to like, trying to explain it to me. Because those documentaries, as you guys know, it really sort of, it has credibility because of the people that are in it. And the stuff that they're talking about just makes so much sense. And if you're if you're the type of person that's open-minded like I am, and you watch these documentaries, there's no way for you to discredit everything that you see there, because I think they're well put together, and there's a lot of credibility and there's a lot of logic. I'm a very logical person. you know
So where does your manhood fit in all this, being a combat Marine? And, like, I think of military people as needing to be man and eat meat and, fall in and be like everybody else, being Canadian. Yeah, we have an army, but our army life isn't as there in our eyes. So I kind of see what I see in movies and how everybody's dressed the same, and you have to show that you're a bigger man than the next person. So how did your ego fit into it?
No, that's an interesting question, and it's one that I'm still sort of getting adjusted to, honestly. But when I started out, you're right that because the culture in the military, especially in the Marine Corps, that I was a part of, as an active duty Marine. Our culture is such that it's not about sort of being, it's all about being manly all the time, right? And a lot of my buddies right now, I can't imagine. So we have these sort of reunions that happen, and I can't imagine walking up to one of these reunions and trying to convince my, a pool of my buddies, like, look, you guys should all stop hunting, all stop doing the things that you grew up doing, eating meat and stuff, and follow me and go plant-based. I can't imagine that, coming over, being very receptive. But for me, it's just, I've always done the things that made the most sense to me. I wasn't one of those people that grew up knowing that I was going to go to the Marine Corps. But at some point, like after 9/11, I said that, I've always cared about people, and I wanted to join, and I wanted to serve, and I wanted to, just kind of be a part of making a difference. And, I was also trying to find my way as a youngster, as I was getting out there, and the Marine Corps just seemed like a very natural fit for me at the time. And I really embraced the culture while I was in, and, and certainly it wouldn't have worked for me to be, for anyone to be plant-based currently in the military, because the stuff that you are sort of provided to eat, it's not inherently plant-based, and there's going to be some work to be done if we are ever going to sort of transition military to go plant-based, because the food has to be kind of especially
uniform.
if you're in combat roles, the food has to be, packaged and be able to last for a certain amount of time. And, it's not always, you're not always able to get fresh food in, that's not always the priority. And so, but again, like your question was, it's just sort of the ego and the manliness. It is something that I still, because now I have, interestingly enough, now that I've evolved in my sort of plant-based thinking, and I'm also fully on board with sort of animal welfare, because the thinking is, hey, if we don't have to slaughter animals for food, why are we doing it? And so now I have buddies, believe it or not, who are still, killing animals for, for just the pure enjoyment of it, and then they consume the animals, right? And they post these things on social media, and so it flows through my feed. But what am I, I'm not going to like unfriend my Marine Corps buddies because, but it's still sort of, it's a conflict it's creating a conflict within me. And I think that it's just part of just, understanding that you have your own personal decisions to make. And, I made a decision to go plant-based because it made a whole lot of sense to me. And right now I am advocating for plant-based living, but I'm not going to be so forceful and, or, try to make it seem like I'm better than anybody else. But I tell you, it's a struggle from that perspective, because, it was like, I grew up in the military where it was like more meat, the better, more meat, more manly, and that was sort of the equation. And so, yeah, it's been interesting.
Do you find that there's been a shift at all over the last 3 years in the people that you've been hanging around with and their acceptance versus their pushback?
No, that's a good question too. But one thing that I've noticed, my circle sort of expanded a lot more toward like plant-based folks. I don't think I purposefully go out and say, hey, I want to meet more plant-based friends. I just, the places that I tend to go to now, are more plant-based friendly restaurants, for example. I have a tech startup that it revolves around plant-based living. And so a lot of the people that I meet now are inherently, more and more plant-based people that I'm meeting. I still have friends, of course, that are not plant-based. And so, like, for example, when I go to my barbershop to get a haircut, which I haven't gone there in a little while,
Wonder why.
right. So they make fun of me because, it's like, here comes the vegan guy, and people, go out their way to let me know why they would never be vegan. That's one of the things that happens, right? People, you don't go in there trying to convince anyone to go vegan, but all of a sudden everybody feel like they need to let you know, like, look, I am going to eat meat and you're not going to stop me. And you're like, okay, well,
Yeah.
I don't know why we're having this conversation, but, but I think their guards go up and they get defensive about their lifestyle, which, I mean, I can relate because, I haven't been vegan my whole life too. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you could kind of try to think back to how you may have reacted if you were on the other side of it as well. I want to run back, if we can, to the military a little bit. And what happens if there are people who are allergic to certain foods or are halal or kosher or something like that? Are exceptions made for them?
There are certain religious and certain cultural acceptance in the military, but generally speaking, in the military is kind of an interesting place because it all depends on sort of the tempo, meaning like, if we're at war, then they're more lenient in terms of making exceptions because they want to expand the force, they want to grow the numbers. But if we're not really heavily involved in, a number of conflicts, which, sort of hasn't been the case in the past few decades, they're not so, but the general idea is that if you have food allergies and so on, you're not going to be permitted to join the military, at least not the Marine Corps that I served in, because you're going to be required to sort of live a fast-paced lifestyle. You're going to be in remote places where, it's not going to be, we can't cater to your special needs. But, from a custom perspective too, I know some people would, don't eat pork and stuff like that. There's usually enough food where you don't have to consume a particular item. If that's what your culture is. But generally speaking, there's usually not a whole lot of exception for to cater to your particular interests.
So if you could think back to while you were there, let's say you were vegan while you were there, or you decided to go vegan while you were there, would you have had enough to eat to be sustained to do your job properly based on what was there? Or would you have to have become maybe like a visual vegan where if you don't see the animal products, they're not really there, just so that you can kind of, get by? How would you have been able to manage that?
That's the short answer is it would have been really, really tough, because there's sort of two sides to my, to like the combat military. There is the side where you're in America, right, where you could probably find anything that you want to eat, as long as you're not away somewhere in remote parts doing training, right? Which is when you go away to those remote parts, it's similar to being deployed overseas. But when you're thinking strictly just being deployed somewhere in a foreign country and you have to rely on the military to care for you, provide you your food and stuff. You're going to have to just kind of eat what you're given. Now, there are certain foods that don't necessarily have meat, like even our, we call them MRE, meals ready to eat. It's some, it comes in packages that you just kind of heat up on the go. It's very quick. But some of these meals don't necessarily have any meat in it, right? But it doesn't really lend itself it's sort of like the whole sort of movement of, the Beyond Meat and so on. It doesn't really lend itself very well to sort of be natural, organic, or anything like that. So if you're one of those sort of vegans who are trying to be as natural as possible, the MREs are not going to be your best bet. But it would be very, very tough to sustain, because you get issued, a lot of times you get issued your food, and no one is going through your food to make sure that, your ration is going to be vegan. And as a matter of fact, if you, the military is a very tough environment. And so people are going to, make sure that they kind of get that lifestyle out of you, because that could become a compromise, because we need you to be healthy and strong all the time, and not be worried that you might not be eating all your meals because you're trying to be vegan. It would have been really, really difficult. And, I did remember having, after I've been vegan now for a while, I've been trying to think back to my time in the military. Like, were there anyone, while I was serving, that was like interested in living a non-meat lifestyle? And there might have been like one or two guys I remembered that, they shied away from eating meat, and they would get made fun of just for that, because it was just not the kind of environment where you shy away from, eating whatever you're given to eat. So that's the short answer, is it would be really, really tough.
So let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now with Plantarion. Can you explain to us what that's all about, so we can spread that around?
No, yeah. So thanks for the opportunity to kind of describe Plantarion. So Plantarion is a concept that I came up with when I went vegan. And one of the things that I noticed was, we talked about the struggle of going vegan. But then on the flip side, there are people who are very good at being vegan, so to speak. And so a lot of these people are offering services, whether they're health coaches that also offer nutritional services, or they're lifestyle coaches that, offer you and, the guide that you need to become vegan or sustain the lifestyle. So I started noticing that. And then so I have somewhat of a tech background, meaning that I've created, mobile apps before. And so I started thinking about this two-sided market, and I said, you know what? I think that a lot, and then I also talked with a lot of people who were going plant-based and then reverting back, because they said it's so challenging to maintain the lifestyle. And, it was a lot of, what I was hearing is a lot of like, education around sort of how to really sustain a plant-based lifestyle. And so I wanted to, I think all of us, when we go plant-based, we want more people to go plant-based. And so I started thinking about sort of creating this hub where people can connect with some service providers that can help guide them as they're trying to transition, as they're trying to sustain plant-based living. And so that's what Plantarion essentially is today. It's a place where, if you're a health coach, if you're a plant-based chef, if you're, a lifestyle coach, you list yourself on this platform, and then people, it's primarily in the US today, but, we plan to sort of expand this thing to become, a global, because plant-based is not just unique to America, as you guys know, or Canada. It's all around the world today. And so what I want people to be able to do is, download our mobile app, search and connect. So the thing that I like to explain to people because a lot of people say, well, how is Plantarion any different than a Google search or anything else? And I say, well, what we're doing is we're creating this centralized place where, when you're curious about plant-based living, you go to this app, and only services that you're going to find there are plant-based related services. That's one thing. And then the other thing is, this partnership that you're developing with folks. The flip side is that there's a supply side where, once people identify that they want to be a plant-based service provider, then they have to make a decision. Do I do this sort of as a part-time, or do I do this full-time? And you think about like Uber, people sort of do Uber as a side gig, and some people do it as a full-time gig. And so we're just kind of, bringing the supply and demand side together with Plantarion.
I love that. And I think that it's really going to help people, and it is helping people already. And that's the other thing, is you look out there, and I mean, we even get a ton of requests to come on the Plantarion podcast from health coaches and what have you. And we need to go to their site. We need to go to their Instagram. We need to figure out, are they plant-based? Are they well-known? Do they know what they're talking about? Not even are they well-known, but are they well-respected? And do they know what they're talking about? And where was their education from?
Yeah.
And there's so much research to be done. And if we could like quickly look them up on a site like that to at least get through the first round to say, okay, we need to use our time to look further, or, well, if they're not here, no thanks, because, we want to support the plant-based and vegan world here. So, being on the other side, it can totally help save time and really make this plant-based living more sustainable and bring more health to them and their family and the people that they love. So I commend you for doing that. That's amazing.
Essentially, that's why we started this show, right? We wanted to share our knowledge, but also network with other amazing people that are sharing similar messages with as many people as we can. And so that's why we got into podcasting. That's why we got into health coaching and nutrition as well. And so having one place to go to get all the information for the consumer makes a lot of sense, and is a very, very helpful kind of thing to have.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you guys approve, because sometimes, I talk to non-plant-based people and they're just like, who's going to use this? What is this? And, you get those kind of questions, and you start to question whether your sanity. But no, I appreciate the feedback. And you guys touched on two points actually that I wanted to kind of just chat about quickly. The education of the plant-based service providers. That's one that I get asked quite often is, how are you vetting these plant-based service providers? And I think it's a really important question, because, again, when I talk to a lot of people, they're reverting back from being plant-based. And part of that is, some people told me stories about just not feeling healthy when they went plant-based. And that's kind of puzzling to me. But one of the things that I keep hearing is that people feel like they're not getting all the right nutrients when they go plant-based. And so if we're standing up a platform and we're offering plant-based service providers, we want to vet them and make sure that they know what they're talking about. And so there are a lot of institutions that are certifying plant-based service providers. So one of the things that I'm working on is really partnering with these institutions to make sure that, we create sort of a system that, that really highlights the providers who are accredited, the ones that are certified. And so we're working on that. The other aspect of it too is, we don't want to have folks on the platform that are, sort of, part-time vegan and they're promoting the lifestyle. We want people who are true, true to the cause of being plant-based. Because, if you're going to teach someone about plant-based living, I think you should be yourself. It's just a simple principle. I wanted to touch on those two things.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And we've also seen a lot of coaches or chefs or influencers fall off the plant-based or vegan wagon recently. And, so to the point of people don't feel like they're getting the most nutrients, maybe it's because they're with a coach that doesn't know what they're doing. Maybe it's because they're not with a coach. And I almost feel like when you're ready to go plant-based, you need to like go to a socket. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say it that way because I don't want anybody to do it. I feel like you need to be zapped, and you need to zap away all of your past learning about nutrition and start fresh. Because what people are doing is they're saying, okay, I'm plant-based, but I still think carbs are bad, so I'm still going to avoid carbs. Or, okay, I'm plant-based, but I shouldn't be eating this, or I still need to portion my food, right? I still need to make sure I'm not eating too much. And when you combine your old knowledge with the plant-based knowledge, that's when we find people really do
start to
get into trouble. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And I honestly, as you were talking there, I found myself, I was doing that too when I transitioned. But you're right. You really just need to, think that this is a new way, and sort of forget about all, because, as part of your formal education, you learn some things about nutrition. My story of being in the military, I had to sit through a lot of, classes about nutrition. And all of that was just centered on sort of the standard, American diet. And so when you make a shift, you're trying to incorporate that education into sort of this new thing, and it doesn't really fit. It's a clean slate. You have to
need a memory wipe. Yeah.
And nutrition's probably the most confusing topic on the planet, and you could find people that talk about one side of it and find other people that talk on a total polar end. So people are very, very, very confused about what to listen to. And so having a place to go where there's scientific evidence and the right people that know what they're talking about because they are certified and they've lived the life and are leading as an example and being a role model makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, and that consistency, right? Because you're right that, the information is being distorted and dependent. And even today, myself, I talk to so many people now that I've been doing the Plantarion. And before I forget, I have to tell you guys about our podcast too. So we, as you were describing, we launched a podcast for the same reason, because when I thought about it and why I was creating Plantarion, it's those same points that you hit on about, sort of getting information out to people. And so what we've been doing, we launched a podcast, and we're bringing on people from, the health, animal welfare, the environmental sectors, and so really just getting information and debunking a lot of the myths around just like, why, because there's always going to be an excuse why you should not go plant-based, right? But when you hear, really credible people and people know what they're talking about. For example, our latest guest that we had on was Dr. Neil Bernard. I really enjoyed just sitting down and listening to that guy talking, because there are no holes in the things that he's saying. He's giving it to you from experience. He's giving it to you from education. And also from, firsthand living. And so when you hear that kind of stuff, you really have to dig deep in order to try to come up with a valid excuse of not going plant-based. And I just think it's really important, because, these days I talk to a lot of my family members who are not plant-based, and I tell them, nowadays people try to like avoid me and avoid the topic. And, I tell them, I'm not telling you guys this because I'm trying to be annoying. I'm telling you guys this because I think that it's really, really important. I see, plant-based living as a matter of life and death. And, people really need to realize that, because I mentioned Dr. Bernard on the show recently, and he talked about his early days of medical school and performing an autopsy on a patient. On someone that passed away, and just kind of opening up the person and realizing that they died from food-related just disease, and just it's so important, because your family, your loved ones, you really just want them to be healthy, like we started out talking about. You want them to be healthy and not having to live a miserable life of medication and going to the hospital for surgeries. And so this is, I tell my older brother, interestingly enough, he's the one who's working at a hospital as a nurse. But I am telling him about the benefits of living healthy, and and telling him why that I think that every time he talks to me, he's going to hear about plant-based living.
Yeah, the truth is that change is very challenging for most people to go through. It's a very difficult process, and people need to really be open-minded, like you talked about earlier, and willing to accept that the change that they could make could be something that could give them life like it did to me and improve their quality of life that they may currently have. So for people that want to learn more about Plantarion or learn more about you, where would you want them to go to check out that information?
Yeah, so thank you for that opportunity. So if you want to, learn more about Plantarion, all you have to do is just, type in plantarion.com, and that's Plantarion, plantarion.com. And, once you land on our website, from there, you can, click on the different social media. You can also check out our podcast, the Plantarion podcast, from the website. Our mobile apps are in the respective app stores, the Android and the Apple Store. And, so we're on Twitter, Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, Facebook. As far as me, same deal. You just, type in Andy Nevers. You'll be able to find me on Instagram, Facebook. And those are the two platforms that I mainly, I'm active on, and also on LinkedIn.
All right, so we're going to link to all that in our show notes at planttrainers.com.
Right.
And we want to thank you so much for being here on the Plant Trainers podcast. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna return the favor and invite you guys over to the Plantarion podcast here soon. But no, thank you for having me. It was great chatting, and sharing our stories here.
Thank you. We're grateful for your time.
All right. Have a great day.